The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never seen such fear. Representatives from 100 different worlds sat in their floating seats, watching the holographic display with horror. Red dots marked the fallen worlds. Each dot represented billions of dead. Chancellor Varric of the Tellarian Republic stood at the center podium. His blue-scaled hand shook as he spoke. Tears ran down his face like tiny rivers. 3 more worlds have fallen to the Vorthak Empire. Kalos Prime, Arcturus Minor, and New Tellaria are gone. Our people are either dead or enslaved. The chamber was silent except for the soft humming of the life support systems. Even the usually chatty Zephyrian delegates sat quiet. The Vorthak Empire had been growing stronger for decades. Now they were unstoppable. Their fleet has 50,000 ships, Varric continued. His voice broke. We have maybe 8,000 left. The other council races have refused to help. They say the risk is too great. High Counselor Zara floated in her chair near the ceiling. Her ancient voice carried across the chamber. The Vorthak have made their terms clear. Surrender or die. We cannot fight such numbers. Ambassador Choi Hyejin sat in the human section. She was young for a diplomat, maybe 30 years old. Her black hair was tied back in a simple style. She wore the dark blue uniform of the United Earth Federation. Most delegates barely noticed the human section. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only made contact 15 years ago. What about the Corvan Defense Fleet? Asked a delegate from the insectoid hive worlds. Zara's tentacles moved in what humans had learned was a gesture of sadness. The Corvans tried to help. The Vorthak destroyed their entire fleet in one battle. 200 ships gone in an hour. The chamber erupted in frightened whispers. If the mighty Corvans could not stand against the Vorthak, who could? Chancellor Varric raised his hands for silence. My people have days, maybe hours left. Our last stronghold on Arcturus Prime is under siege. When it falls, the Tellarian Republic dies with it. His voice was barely a whisper now. I beg you. Someone help us. The silence stretched on. No one spoke. No one moved. The math was simple. The Vorthak were too strong. Then Ambassador Choi Hyejin stood up. All eyes turned to her. She was small compared to most aliens in the chamber. Humans were among the smallest species in the known galaxy, but something in her posture made everyone pay attention. The United Earth Federation will answer your call, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. The chamber exploded. Delegates shouted over each other. The noise was deafening. Impossible, screeched a bird-like avian representative. Humans have no fleet. You are too new, called out someone from the aquatic depth dwellers. This is not your fight. High Counselor Zara raised her many arms for silence. Ambassador Choi, while we appreciate the sentiment, humanity lacks the military strength for such an undertaking. Your fleet has what, maybe 200 ships? Hyejin nodded. 212 to be exact. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Even Chancellor Varric looked confused. My dear human friend, we are grateful. But 200 ships against 50,000? It would be suicide. Hyejin reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button. A hologram appeared above her head. It showed a human warship. The ship looked strange compared to alien vessels. It was smaller, darker, and covered in odd angles. This is the UEF Indomitable, she said. Flagship of Admiral Lee Minho. The Admiral is currently in hyperspace heading for the Arcturus system. The chamber fell silent again. Chancellor Varric stared at the hologram. You already sent your fleet? We sent our fleet the moment we received your distress call, Hyejin replied. Admiral Lee will reach Arcturus Prime in 18 hours, but the Vorthak will destroy them, Varric protested. Your brave people will die for nothing. Hyejin smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. Chancellor Varric, may I ask you something? Of course. When humans first made contact with the galaxy, what did you think of us? Varric looked confused. Well, you seemed peaceful. Curious about the stars. Your technology was adequate but not impressive. You appeared to be explorers, not warriors. And in the 15 years since contact, what have you learned about human history? I know your people had some conflicts on your homeworld. Nothing unusual. Hyejin's smile grew wider. Some conflicts. Yes, you could call them that. She pressed another button on her device. New holograms appeared. Images of Earth's history. Ancient battles. Medieval wars. Modern warfare. Humans have been at war for 6,000 years, she said calmly. We have fought with sticks and stones. We have fought with swords and shields. We have fought with guns and bombs. We have fought in the air, on land, underwater, and in space. We have studied every form of combat ever invented. The chamber was dead silent now. The images kept changing. Humans in armor, humans in tanks, humans in fighter jets, humans in spacesuits carrying weapons that looked deadly even in hologram form. When we reached the stars, Hijin continued, we did not come as peaceful explorers. We came as predators looking for new hunting grounds. But we found a galaxy full of civilized species who had forgotten how to fight, so we decided to be civilized too. She paused and looked directly at Chancellor Varric. But we never forgot how to be dangerous. The hologram changed one more time. It showed the human fleet in hyperspace, 200 ships moving in perfect formation. Each ship bristled with weapons. The design was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The Vorthak think numbers matter, Hijin said. They think bigger ships are better ships. They think fear is a weapon. She turned to address the entire chamber. They have never fought humans. High Counselor Zara's voice was barely audible. What happens if your fleet loses? Hijin's expression grew cold. Then Earth sends the next fleet. And the next. And the next. We have been preparing for Galactic War since the day we learned we were not alone. The Vorthak picked the wrong species to threaten. She sat down. The chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, Chancellor Varric spoke. How many more fleets does Earth have? That, said Ambassador Choi Hyejin, is classified. The hyperspace tunnel around the human fleet looked like a river of stars. Admiral Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the UEF Indomitable, watching the swirling lights through the main window. Behind him, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. The bridge was darker than most alien ships. Humans preferred it that way. Admiral, called out Communications Officer Park Soo-jin. We're receiving updates from Galactic Council intelligence. The Vorthak fleet is maintaining siege positions around Arcturus Prime. They haven't detected our approach yet. Minho nodded without turning around. He was a tall man with gray hair and hard eyes. He had commanded ships for 20 years. Before that, he had fought in the Belt Wars against the Mars Separatists. How many enemy ships? 53,412 vessels, sir. Mostly heavy cruisers and dreadnoughts. They're arranged in a standard siege formation around the planet. Captain Park Ji-hoon stepped up beside the Admiral. He was younger, maybe 40, with the build of someone who spent time in the gym. Standard formation. They're not expecting a fight. Why would they? Minho replied. Every species they've met fights the same way. Big ships in straight lines, shooting energy weapons until someone gives up. He finally turned from the window. Status report. All ships ready for combat deployment, reported Commander Kim Da-hyun from the tactical station. She was the youngest officer on the bridge, but she had graduated top of her class from the Naval War College. Marine pods are loaded and sealed. Weapon systems are charged. Electronic warfare suites are online. Time to target? 17 hours, 36 minutes at current speed. Minho walked to his command chair and sat down. The chair was surrounded by screens showing every ship in the fleet. 212 vessels. It looked tiny compared to what they were about to face, but numbers could be deceiving. Captain Park, walk with me, Minho said, standing again. The two men left the bridge and walked through the ship's corridors. The Indomitable was massive by human standards, but it felt cramped compared to alien vessels. Every space was used. Every surface had a purpose. There was no decoration, no wasted room. This was a warship, not a palace. They passed rows of cryopods in the marine bay. Each pod held a sleeping soldier. Through the frost-covered glass, you could see faces of men and women from Earth, Mars, and the asteroid colonies. 50,000 Marines on this ship alone, Park said. Another 1,000,000 spread across the fleet. The Vorthak won't expect boarding actions, Minho replied. They rely on their ship weapons. They think personal combat is primitive. They continued walking until they reached the weapons deck. Lieutenant Commander Song Taehyung was running final checks on the railgun batteries. He looked up as the officers approached. Admiral, all primary weapons ready. Kinetic rounds loaded and charged. Nuclear warheads armed and ready. Good. How about the special packages? Song smiled. The relativistic kill vehicles are ready, sir. 6 per ship. Once we fire them, anything they hit just stops existing. Park whistled low. The Council would ban those weapons if they knew we had them. The Council has never faced extinction, Minho said coldly. They've never had to make the hard choices. They think war should be civilized. He looked at Song. How long to prepare for combat deployment? We can go from hyperspace to full combat readiness in 30 seconds, sir. Outstanding. Carry on. The two senior officers continued their tour. They visited the Electronic Warfare Center, where Commander Yu Seokjin and his team were preparing to jam every Vorthak communication and sensor system. They stopped by the medical bay, where doctors were ready to treat wounded Marines. They checked the fighter bays where Lieutenant Bae Suman was briefing her pilots. Remember, Suman was telling her squadron, Vorthak fighters are big and slow. They're designed to intimidate, not to dogfight. Use your speed and size advantage. Get in close, deploy your nukes, and get out. Do not try to be heroes, her pilots nodded. They were all young, all hungry for combat. Most had trained in Earth's brutal flight schools, where the gravity was 3 times galactic standard and the courses were designed by people who understood that space combat was 3-dimensional. Chess played at the speed of light. Minho and Park returned to the bridge as the fleet began its final approach to the Arcturus system. The Admiral took his seat and activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Lee. In 1 hour, we will drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Arcturus system. The enemy has 50,000 ships. We have 200. They think those odds favor them. He paused. They're wrong. Every human ship in the fleet received the message. Crews made final preparations. Weapons were charged. Marines woke up from cryosleep and began suiting up. Pilots ran through pre-flight checks. Engineers made sure every system was running perfectly. The Vorthak Empire has terrorized this galaxy for decades, Minho continued. They destroy worlds, enslave populations, and spread fear wherever they go. Today that ends. Today they learn what happens when you threaten innocent people in front of humans. On the navigation display, the Arcturus system grew larger. They could see the massive Vorthak fleet clustered around the planet like a dark cloud. 50,000 ships, each one larger than anything in the human fleet. We are not just fighting for the Talarians, Minho said. We are fighting for every species that has suffered under Vorthak rule. We are fighting to show the galaxy that bullies can be beaten. We are fighting because it's the right thing to do. Commander Kim Da-hyun counted down from her station. 30 seconds to normal space. All ships prepare for combat deployment, Minho ordered. Remember your training. Trust your equipment. Watch your battle buddies' backs. And show these alien bastards why you never pick a fight with humans. 10 seconds, Da-hyun announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 212 ships appeared at the edge of the Arcturus system, like ghosts materializing from the void. Immediately they began to move. Not in the straight lines that aliens expected, but in complex patterns that made them hard to target. On the Indomitable's bridge, alarms began to sound. Not warning alarms, but battle alarms. The sound every human warrior had trained to hear. Enemy fleet detected, reported Park Soo-jin. Sir, they're not moving. They're just sitting there. They're confused, Park Ji-hoon said with a grin. They've never seen anyone actually come to fight them. Admiral Lee Minho stood up from his command chair. Outside the main window, the enemy fleet looked like a city of lights floating in space. 50,000 ships. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Minho smiled. Signal the fleet, he said quietly. Execute Protocol 7. Warlord Gorak stood 8 feet tall and weighed 600 pounds. His scales were black with red markings that showed his rank in the Vorthak Empire. Scars covered his arms and chest, each one a trophy from a conquered world. He had commanded fleets for 40 years and had never lost a battle. The bridge of his flagship, Death's Embrace, was the size of a football field. Hundreds of Vorthak officers worked at stations arranged in terraced levels. The ship itself was 12 miles long and bristled with enough weapons to destroy a moon. Around it, 50,000 more ships waited in perfect formation. Warlord, called his sensor officer, a smaller Vorthak with green scales, detecting new contacts at the system edge. Hyperspace signatures matched the unknown fleet approaching our position. Gorak barely looked up from the tactical display showing Arcturus Prime. The planet's defense grid had fallen 2 days ago. The remaining Talarian ships hid behind the planet like frightened children. Soon he would order the final bombardment and claim another victory for the Empire. How many ships? He growled. 200. No, 212 vessels, Warlord. This time Gorak did look up. His red eyes narrowed as he studied the sensor display. The approaching ships were small, much smaller than proper warships should be. What species? Unknown, sir. The energy signatures don't match any known design in our database. Around the bridge, other officers began to notice the new arrivals. Conversation stopped. Warriors who had conquered a dozen star systems stared at the display with growing confusion. 200 ships? Laughed Commander Vex, Gorak's second in command. Against our 50,000? Are they insane? Perhaps they're coming to surrender, suggested another officer. Many species send token fleets to show respect before giving up their worlds. Gorak studied the tactical display more carefully. The approaching ships moved in strange patterns, not the straight-line formations used by every civilized species, but complex spirals and curves that made no sense. Communications, he ordered. Scan their transmissions. I want to know who dares approach the Vorthak Empire. The communications officer worked at his station for several minutes. His face grew confused. Sir, they're not broadcasting surrender terms. They're not even trying to communicate with us. They appear to be coordinating attack formations. The bridge fell silent. In 40 years of conquest, no enemy had ever approached the Vorthak fleet with hostile intent. Most surrendered before the shooting started. Those who didn't were destroyed so quickly that the battles barely counted as combat. Attack formations? Gorak's voice was dangerously quiet. These insects think they can attack us? On the main display, the unknown ships continued their approach. They moved like nothing Gorak had ever seen. Each ship seemed to know exactly where every other ship was going. They flowed around each other like water, never colliding, never losing formation. What's their technology level? Gorak demanded. The science officer consulted his instruments. Difficult to determine, Warlord. Their ships use unknown materials. Energy output suggests advanced fusion reactors. Weapons appear to be primitive kinetic systems. Kinetic weapons, Commander Vex laughed. They're using metal projectiles? Against our energy shields? This will be over in minutes. Gorak was not laughing. Something felt wrong. Species with advanced fusion technology didn't use primitive weapons unless those weapons weren't primitive at all. He had ruled an empire by trusting his instincts, and his instincts were screaming warnings. Fleet deployment, he ordered. All ships prepare for combat. Launch fighters. Charge primary weapons. The massive Vorthak fleet began to move. 50,000 ships turning toward the approaching humans was like watching a continent shift. Engines that could power small cities flared to life. Weapons capable of cracking planets began to charge. On the sensor display, the human fleet suddenly changed direction. Instead of approaching in a single group, they split apart. Dozens of smaller formations spread across space like an opening flower. What are they doing? Vex asked. Before anyone could answer, the first human weapons fired. The objects that streaked across space looked like simple metal rods. They were roughly 6 feet long and made of tungsten, one of the densest metals in the universe. But they weren't simple at all. Electromagnetic accelerators had fired them at 30% of light speed. The first rod hit a Vorthak heavy cruiser amidships. The ship's energy shields, designed to deflect plasma bolts and laser beams, might as well have been soap bubbles. The tungsten rod punched through the shields, through the armor, through the ship's entire structure, and out the other side. The cruiser exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. Impossible! Beck shouted. More rods followed. Dozens, then hundreds of them, each one moving at relativistic speeds, each one carrying the kinetic energy of a small nuclear bomb. The Vorthak shields were useless. The armor plating that could withstand plasma cannons crumpled like paper. Return fire, Gorak roared. All ships, return fire! The Vorthak fleet responded with everything they had. Thousands of plasma cannons opened up. Missile batteries launched their loads. The space between the fleets lit up like a second sun, but the human ships weren't where the Vorthak weapons were aimed. They had moved again, sliding between the incoming fire with impossible precision. It was like watching someone dodge raindrops in a thunderstorm. How are they moving so fast? The navigation officer called out. On the tactical display, Gorak could see the answer. The human ships were smaller, yes, but they were also much more agile. While Vorthak vessels were massive dreadnoughts designed to intimidate enemies, the human ships were built for war. Every line was functional. Every system was optimized for combat. More kinetic rounds struck the Vorthak fleet. Ships that had conquered worlds died in seconds. The massive dreadnought Eternal Victory simply vanished when 3 rods struck it simultaneously. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from the planet's surface. Warlord, the communications officer called out. Admiral Kazek's squadron is requesting permission to retreat. Retreat? Gorak could not believe what he was hearing. Vorthak warriors did not retreat. They conquered or died trying. Denied all ships advance. Crush these insects. But the Vorthak fleet was not advancing. Half the ships were trying to turn and flee. The other half were firing wildly at targets they couldn't hit. Formation discipline had collapsed. Ships were colliding with each other in their panic. The humans, meanwhile, moved through the chaos like surgeons. Their formations never broke. Their fire never stopped. They struck exactly where they intended and nothing else. Sir, the sensor officer's voice was high with panic. Multiple ships have lost main power. The humans are using some kind of electronic warfare. Our communications are being jammed. Gorak looked at the tactical display and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. In less than 10 minutes, his invincible fleet had lost over 1,000 ships. The humans had lost none. What are they? He whispered. Commander Vex, normally so confident, was staring at the display in shock. I don't know, Warlord. I've never seen anything like this. It's like they were born to fight. Another wave of kinetic rounds swept through the Vorthak formation. The dreadnought Iron Fist, veteran of 20 campaigns, broke in half. The battlecruiser Death's Hand exploded so violently that it took 2 nearby ships with it. On the communications channel, Gorak could hear the panic in his commander's voices. Ships were screaming for help. Others were begging for permission to retreat. Some had stopped responding altogether. Sir, the navigation officer called out, his voice barely controlled. The human ships are changing formation again. They're surrounding us. Gorak looked at the display and saw that it was true. Somehow, impossibly, 200 human ships had surrounded 50,000 Vorthak vessels. They moved in a perfect sphere around the enemy fleet, firing from all directions at once. This is impossible, Vex said quietly. How can so few ships defeat so many? For the first time in his life, Warlord Gorak had no answer. The last thing he saw before a tungsten rod vaporized the bridge was a message that appeared on every screen in the fleet. It was written in perfect Vorthak, in words that burned themselves into his dying mind. You should have stayed home. Admiral Lee Minho watched the tactical display with the calm expression of a man who had done this before. The Vorthak fleet was breaking apart like a house in a hurricane. Ships scattered in all directions, their formation completely destroyed. Some tried to run. Others fired wildly at shadows. Many simply stopped moving, overwhelmed by the human electronic warfare assault. Time elapsed? He asked quietly. 12 minutes, 30 seconds, replied Commander Kim Dahyun. Her fingers danced across her control station, coordinating the attacks of 200 ships with mathematical precision. Enemy casualties at 47% and climbing. Captain Park Ji-hoon stood beside the Admiral's chair, watching the display with professional interest. They're not adapting, he observed. Still trying to fight us like we're another alien species. They don't know how to adapt, Minho replied. Look at their movements. Everything they do is predictable. Turn left, fire forward, retreat in straight lines. They've been fighting the same way for so long, they can't imagine anything else. On the tactical display, human ships moved through the Vorthak formation like sharks through a school of fish. The human vessels were smaller, faster, and infinitely more deadly. Each ship captain knew exactly where every other human ship would be at any given moment. They had trained for this kind of battle for years. Sir, called Lieutenant Park Soo-jin from communications. We're receiving surrender requests from multiple Vorthak ships. Acknowledged, Minho said without emotion. Ignore them. Sir? The Admiral turned to look at her. His eyes were cold as space. They showed no mercy to the Talarians. They enslaved entire worlds. They killed billions of innocent people. He turned back to the display. Today they learn what justice looks like. Lieutenant Commander Song Tae-hyung reported from the weapons station. Primary railguns at 80% charge. Nuclear missile batteries ready for deployment. Shall I launch the relativistic kill vehicles? Not yet, Minho replied. Save them for the dreadnoughts. The human fleet moved in perfect coordination. Ships that had never fought together before moved like parts of the same organism. This was the result of centuries of human military evolution. Not just weapons and technology, but tactics and doctrine refined through countless wars. On the bridge of the destroyer Vengeance, Captain Nam Ji-won led her squadron in a flanking maneuver that would have been impossible for larger ships. Her vessel slipped between Vorthak formations, striking at supply ships and command vessels before vanishing back into the chaos. Target acquired, her weapons officer reported. Vorthak command ship, 2,000 kilometers starboard. Fire, Jiwan ordered. 3 tungsten rods, each moving at 1/3 light speed, struck the enemy vessel simultaneously. The command ship simply ceased to exist. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a small star. In another part of the battle, Commander Yu Seokjin's electronic warfare team was winning a different kind of fight. Vorthak ships depended on central coordination. When their communications failed, they became confused and isolated. When their sensors were jammed, they fired at ghosts. When their navigation systems were compromised, they flew into each other. Enemy command structure is collapsing, Seokjin reported to the fleet. Multiple ships showing signs of system failure. They're dead in space. Lieutenant Bae Suman led her fighter squadron through the wreckage of the Vorthak fleet. Human fighters were tiny compared to alien interceptors, but they were also much faster and more maneuverable. Each fighter carried a nuclear warhead powerful enough to destroy a ship. Blue leader to all fighters, she broadcast. Target priority goes to anything still shooting back. Remember, we're here to end this war, not to play fair. Her fighters dove through the enemy formation like angry wasps. Vorthak interceptors tried to follow but couldn't match the human speed or agility. The alien pilots had trained to fight other aliens, not humans who had grown up in Earth's crushing gravity and learned to fly in 3 dimensions. Back on the Indomitable, Admiral Minho received reports from across the battlefield. The Vorthak fleet was dying. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades were being destroyed faster than their crews could even understand what was happening. Casualty. Report, he requested. Enemy fleet down to 26,000 ships, Dayun reported. Human losses, 0 ships destroyed, 14 ships reporting minor damage. 0 losses. In 15 minutes of combat against an enemy that outnumbered them 250 to 1, the human fleet had not lost a single ship. It should have been impossible, but humans had spent 6,000 years learning how to kill each other efficiently. When they turned that knowledge against aliens who had never faced real opposition, the results were predictable. Sir, called the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthak flagship, the one calling itself Death's Embrace. Put it through. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of a massive alien ship. Smoke filled the air. Emergency lights flashed red. At the center of the chaos stood a huge reptilian creature covered in scars. Blood ran from a wound on his head. I am Warlord Gorak, the creature said in broken galactic standard. Who are you? What species dares challenge the Vorthak Empire? Minho studied the alien for a moment. Then he smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. We are humans. We come from a world called Earth, and we are here to end your empire. Gorak's red eyes widened. Impossible. 200 ships cannot defeat 50,000. You're wrong, Minho replied calmly. Your ships are already defeated. Your fleet is dying. Your empire will fall because you made one critical mistake. What mistake? You assumed that bigger meant stronger. You thought numbers mattered more than skill. You believed that fear was a weapon. Minho's voice grew cold. But most importantly, you forgot that somewhere in this galaxy, there was a species that never stopped fighting. On the tactical display, the last group of Vorthak dreadnoughts attempted to form a defensive line. They were massive ships, each one the size of a small city. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their armor could withstand nuclear bombardment. None of that mattered. Song, Minho said quietly. Deploy the relativistic kill vehicles. Yes, sir. Across the human fleet, launch tubes opened. From each ship emerged objects that looked like simple metal cylinders. They were roughly the size of telephone poles and made of ultra-dense materials. Electromagnetic catapults accelerated them to 40% of light speed. When objects that massive hit something at those speeds, the result was not an explosion. It was the complete conversion of matter into energy. The laws of physics became weapons. The Vorthak dreadnoughts simply vanished. One moment they were there, massive and threatening. The next moment there was only expanding clouds of superheated plasma where ships used to be. Time elapsed, Minho requested. 18 minutes 12 seconds, Dahyun replied. Enemy fleet effectively destroyed. Scattered survivors attempting to flee the system. 18 minutes. The battle that galactic strategists had predicted would last months was over in less than 20 minutes. 50,000 ships reduced to scattered wreckage and fleeing survivors. Warlord Gorak's image was still on the main screen. The mighty conqueror who had destroyed worlds now looked like a broken old lizard. His ship was dying around him. His empire was finished. How? Was all he managed to say, Admiral. Lee Min-ho looked at the defeated alien and spoke with the voice of 6 billion humans who had spent their entire history learning to fight. Because when your species was learning to build cities, mine was learning to destroy them. When your people were discovering space travel, mine was perfecting the art of war. You grew soft conquering peaceful species. We grew strong fighting each other. The transmission cut out as Death's embrace exploded. Minho turned to his communications officer. Signal the Talarian Defense Force. Tell them the siege is over. Then send a message to Earth Command. Mission accomplished. Outside the main window, debris from 50,000 enemy ships drifted through space like metallic snow. In the distance, Arcturus Prime shone like a blue jewel, free at last from the shadow of conquest. The human fleet had come to save one world. Instead, they had liberated an entire galaxy. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Representatives from 100 worlds sat in stunned silence, staring at the holographic display that showed the aftermath of the Battle of Arcturus. Debris fields stretched across space where the mighty Vorthak fleet had been destroyed. 50,000 ships reduced to scrap metal in 18 minutes. Chancellor Varric of the Talarian Republic stood at the center podium again. But this time his scaled hands were steady. This time there were no tears. His voice rang clear across the chamber. The Vorthak Empire is finished, he announced. Their fleet is destroyed. Their commanders are dead. Their subject worlds are already rising in rebellion. He paused and looked directly at the human delegation, all because 200 human ships did what 50,000 alien vessels could not. Ambassador Choi Hee-jin sat in the human section with the same calm expression she had worn during the desperate hours before the battle. She showed no triumph, no satisfaction. She looked like someone who had simply completed a necessary task. High Counselor Zara floated near the ceiling, her ancient tentacles moving in complex patterns. The implications are staggering, she said. Humanity has demonstrated military capabilities far beyond anything we imagined possible. In 18 minutes, they changed the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Delegate Corvus from the Avian Republic stood up, his feathers ruffled with agitation. This is exactly what we feared. Humans are too dangerous. They must be contained before they become the next Vorthak Empire. Angry shouts erupted from several delegations. The insectoid hive worlds buzzed in agreement. The aquatic depth dwellers made sounds of distress. Fear spread through the chamber like a virus. Silence. Chancellor Varric's voice boomed across the hall. The chamber fell quiet immediately. I will not listen to cowardice disguised as wisdom. The humans asked for nothing in return for their sacrifice. No territory. No tribute. No political concessions. They came because it was right. He activated a holographic display showing the rescue operations around Arcturus Prime. Human ships were evacuating Talarian refugees, providing medical aid and helping to rebuild defensive systems. Medical teams from Earth were working around the clock to treat the wounded. Look at what they do after victory, Varric continued. They heal, they help, they build. Does this look like an empire in the making? Ambassador Hee-jin stood up slowly. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone wanted to hear what the humans would say now that they had revealed their true power. The United Earth Federation appreciates Chancellor Varric's words, she said. But I understand your fears. Throughout galactic history, military power has led to conquest and oppression. You have every right to be concerned. She walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. So let me make humanity's position clear. We seek no territory beyond our own solar system. We claim no authority over other species. We want no tribute, no vassals, no subjects. Then what do you want? Demanded Delegate Corvus. Hyejin's expression grew serious. We want to make sure that what happened to the Talarians never happens again. We want to ensure that no species has to choose between slavery and extinction. We want to create a galaxy where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates supported the human position. Others demanded restrictions on human military activities. A few suggested immediate alliance with Earth. The noise was deafening. High Counselor Zara raised her arms for silence. When the chamber quieted, she spoke in her ancient, thoughtful voice. Ambassador Hee-jin, what you propose sounds noble, but power corrupts. How can we trust that humanity will not become what you claim to oppose? It was a fair question. Hyegen had expected it. Because we know what we are, she replied. We know our history. We know our capacity for violence. That's exactly why we can be trusted to use that capacity responsibly. She activated her own holographic display. It showed human military bases being established around the galaxy's outer rim. Fast response fleets positioning themselves near known trouble spots. Communication networks linking Earth to distant worlds. We are establishing the Human Rapid Response Fleet, she announced. Any species that faces unprovoked aggression can call for help. Our ships will respond within days, not months. Our soldiers will fight to protect the innocent, not to conquer territory. And who decides what constitutes unprovoked aggression? Asked a delegate from the silicon-based Crystalline Confederacy. The same people who decided that the Vorthak attack on the Talarians was unprovoked, Hyegen replied. The Galactic Council. We're not appointing ourselves as judges. We're volunteering to be the enforcement arm of decisions you make collectively. Chancellor Varric nodded approvingly. A reasonable proposal. The Council debates, humanity acts. The arguments continued for hours. Some species worried about human dominance. Others feared that Earth would eventually demand payment for protection. A few suggested that humans were planning to replace the Vorthak as the galaxy's oppressors. Finally, Ambassador Hyegen called for quiet one last time. I understand your concerns, she said. You don't know us well enough to trust us. So let me tell you something about human nature that might help. She walked back to the human delegation and picked up a small device. The holographic display changed to show images from Earth. Cities at peace. Children playing in parks. Families gathered around dinner tables. Scientists working in laboratories. Artists creating beautiful things. This is what humans do when we're not fighting, she said. We build. We explore. We create. We love our families and take care of our communities. War is something we're good at, not something we enjoy. The images continued. Human colonies on Mars growing food in underground farms. Human scientists sharing discoveries with alien researchers. Human artists collaborating with alien musicians to create new forms of beauty. We spent 6,000 years learning to fight because our world was dangerous and our enemies were many. Hyegen continued. But now we're in space. Now we have room to grow. Now we can use our skills to protect instead of conquer. She paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. The choice is yours. You can fear us and try to contain us, which will only create the conflict you want to avoid. Or you can trust us to do what we came here to do. Make sure the innocent are protected and the bullies are stopped. The debate that followed lasted 3 days. In the end, the vote was close but decisive. The Galactic Council formally recognized the Human Rapid Response Fleet and granted Earth the authority to intervene in cases of unprovoked aggression. 6 months later, the galaxy was a different place. Pirate fleets that had terrorized trade routes for decades had vanished overnight. Slave ships that had operated with impunity now fled at the first sign of human patrol vessels. The criminal cartels that had bought protection from corrupt officials found that humans could not be bribed or intimidated. Admiral Lee Minho, now known throughout the galaxy as the hero of Arcturus, established his headquarters on a space station at the edge of civilized space. From there, he commanded a growing fleet of human and alien vessels, species that had once been victims now volunteered to serve alongside Earth's finest. Captain Park Ji-hoon had been promoted to admiral and given command of the Second Response Fleet. His ships patrolled the galaxy's trouble spots, showing the flag and reminding potential aggressors that someone was watching. Commander Kim Da-yoon now ran the Galactic Military Academy, teaching alien officers human tactical doctrine. Her students came from dozens of worlds, eager to learn how 200 ships had defeated 50,000. The changes were dramatic. Trade flourished because merchants no longer feared pirates. Colonies expanded because settlers knew they would be protected. Scientific expeditions explored dangerous regions because they had military escorts. But perhaps the most important change was psychological. For the first time in galactic history, the innocent had protectors who asked for nothing in return. The weak had guardians who could not be corrupted or intimidated. The galaxy had learned that bullies could be beaten. In the depths of space, ancient evils stirred. Dormant empires awakened. Forgotten threats emerged from dark corners of the galaxy, drawn by reports of this new military power. They would learn what the Vorthak had discovered too late. Humanity had not reached the stars to find peace. They had brought peace with them, enforced by the refined violence of a species that had never forgotten how to be dangerous when danger was required. Ambassador Choi Hyejin stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, looking out at the stars. Behind her, the Galactic Council debated trade agreements and scientific exchanges, the normal business of civilization, made possible because someone was finally watching the Watchers. A young aide approached her. "Ambassador, there's a report of aggressive activity in the outer spiral. Unknown ships attacking mining colonies." Hyejin smiled. It was the same smile she had worn during that desperate session 6 months ago. The smile of someone who knew a secret. "Signal Admiral Lee," she said quietly. "Tell him the galaxy needs its guardians again." The human fleet stood ready, and the galaxy was safer for it.